Do you want to know how to know if your child has oppositional defiant disorder? Well, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all about parenting, good communication, and how to build strong family bonds all over the world through the lens of the principle self-government. I also have authored multiple books on the topic of parenting that even get into some of the difficult behaviors like oppositional defiant disorder. And I was a therapeutic treatment care parent for level 3 treatment children as a foster parent for many years. So I took many children into my home who had oppositional defiant disorder, as well as other things like ADHD, OCD, and RAD, as well as autism spectrum, sensory issues, you name it. They came to my home, and that's why people asked me to be on a program called The World's Strictest Parents. Today we're going to be talking about ODD and how to know if that's something you're dealing with. In this video, we're going to be talking about oppositional defiant disorder and maybe what some of the other options are for the cause of some of those negative behaviors that you might be seeing in your home or with that child that you love, and what you can do about some of those defiant tendencies. Oppositional defiant disorder is very difficult to diagnose. And I actually do not have the piece of paper that allows me to diagnose it for you. And since I'm not in your home, I can't diagnose your child. There's my disclaimer. But I can tell you what some of the key characteristics of oppositional defiant disorder are and what some of the characteristics are of other behavioral traits that might be leading to some of that oppositional behavior as well. First, let's talk about oppositional defiant disorder. Is your child short-tempered? Are they easily annoyed or quick to show anger? Does your child often argue with authority? Do they often defy authority or refuse to comply with authority? And do they try to annoy other people seemingly on purpose? And when all of this happens, do they refuse to take personal responsibility for it? Do they blame other people? Does the person often seem anxious or distressed and end up making other people around them feel distressed or anxious too? Because there is an amount of anxiety that's associated with oppositional defiant disorder. Now, all of those things I listed could be oppositional defiant disorder, or they could be just strong-willed, but they probably are not just defiant behaviors. So those are our three options. Does your child have oppositional defiant disorder? Do they have a strong-willed tendency, or are they just displaying defiant behaviors? Maybe because of a habit, or someone has taught them that those defiant behaviors might work to get things their way. Well, if your child does all of those things on the list, their chances of being oppositional defiant are high, but they could also just be a strong-willed person. But the one thing that makes a difference is, do they do all of those things all of the time? Meaning, if your child is strong-willed and they're just against you, are they just pushing back against you? Are they just trying to annoy you or defying your authority? Or do they defy everyone's authority? The teachers, the people at church, the grandparents, everyone? If they defy everyone's authority and they are constantly pushing back against those authority figures, or even just trying to control and annoy everyone around them, then chances are they could have oppositional defiant disorder. People don't know why someone would end up with the disorder. They don't know if it's the way that they were brought up or if it's just part of how they are naturally as a person. And it could be both genetics and upbringing. So we can't really point a finger on why it happens, although usually parents who are oppositional defiant end up breeding children who are oppositional defiant. Again, we could say, well, is that nature or nurture? It's hard to say because their parent has oppositional defiance, and so it could be both. Anyway, no matter what it is, if you are working with a child who you suspect might be having oppositional defiant disorder, there are things you can do, and we're going to talk about those. But before we talk about those, we do need to definitely discuss what strong-willed looks like and just defiant behaviors looks like. But before we can even do that, there is something that just must happen. Do you see that button that says subscribe? Click it now. Now is the time to subscribe, then we move on. So what does it mean to be strong-willed? When a person is strong-willed, they like to have a lot of control over things. They like to have things their way. Well, the oppositional defiant person could also look like that, right? So they want to be in control, but it doesn't necessarily manifest all the time. When a person is strong-willed, there might be certain circumstances that they show their strong wills and others that they don't. So when a person is strong-willed, they don't push against all authority, just certain authority, okay? So maybe they push against parents, but they don't push against school administrators, or they won't push against police, but they will push against administrators at the school or a teacher. They won't push against friends, but they'll push against any adults, okay? So it could be that it switches depending on what the person wants to get out of it. So anyway, strong-willed people like to be in control. They like to have a say. They want to be heard. That's super important. They don't necessarily get into annoying people as often. That's not one of their characteristics as much as just questioning everything and wanting to make sure that they have the exact truth. The strong-willed person likes the truth. The oppositional defiant person likes to make waves. If you have oppositional defiant disorder, you get a kind of a high out of making people have to work around the obstacles that you put in their path. That's the difference. Okay, so then there's just defiant behaviors. Anybody could display defiant behaviors at any time. There could be just a time where you just don't feel like it. You don't want to eat your vegetables, and so you sit there and say, nope, I'm not going to eat my vegetables. That does not mean that the person is totally strong-willed. It might be a strong-willed moment. It also does not mean that the person has oppositional defiant disorder, but they are displaying an oppositional or defiant behavior at the time. So anyone could display an oppositional or defiant behavior, and that doesn't mean that they have a disorder or a certain type of a will. So what do we do about it then? No matter if your child has oppositional defiant disorder, or they're strong-willed, or they're just showing an oppositional or a defiant behavior from time to time, because maybe it's a habit, the solution is the same. That is the great news. So learning the skills of self-government will help with all of these things. And I know because for years I took in troubled children. They were all between the ages of 12 and 18. And many of them had diagnosed oppositional defiant disorder. They had ADHD, ADD, RAD, FAS, compulsive lying, anger control issues. There were many things that we dealt with, and guess what? We used the same skills for all of those things. Predictable, pre-taught self-government principles and skills actually have the power to stop more of that oppositional behavior on the back end. And if you have a firm, predictable, calm way to correct problems and help someone through those intensive moments when they're showing a lot of that oppositional defiant disorder tendency, then you can do anything. Now, I will say your child that has oppositional defiant disorder will push back harder than your just regular strong-willed child. And your strong-willed child will push back more than your child that's just displaying some oppositional or defiant behaviors from time to time. So as you embark upon the road of self-government and you teach the children to follow instructions, accept no answers and criticism, accept consequences and disagree appropriately, you teach them how to be calm when they don't want to, how to communicate effectively. When you do that, there will be pushback. When you're parenting an oppositional defiant child, that's what happens. They have a habit, a very ingrained habit. They want to push back. It's a craving. They have to tell themselves no, give themselves a no answer. It takes a lot of practice for them to do this. So keep that in mind as you start on the road to teaching them self-government. I would start by teaching them the 4 basic skills. First, teach them how to follow instructions. That is this red book right here. It teaches children how to look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or ask to disagree appropriately. That's going to be really important. And then do the task immediately and then check back. Now, if that skill is something they just really don't want to do, then you have to teach them how to disagree appropriately. These 4 books teach the 4 basic skills of self-government. The purple book, the disagree appropriately skill, is going to be one they will not want to do. You will say, I'm going to teach you how to disagree appropriately. I'm not saying that. I want to say it a different way. I want to say it like this. Okay? They will push back from every single word. No, I'm not going to look at you, but I will say that. They'll push back on certain things and not other things, or they'll just say, I'm not doing that. I refuse. You can't make me. True, you can't make them, but that is the one skill where they get to be understood. And you have to explain that to them. This is the one way where you get to explain your point of view or what you want. And I'll let you know something, it works a lot too. Which means you will get your way a lot if you use the disagree appropriately skill. That means that when they disagree appropriately with you, if it's not a major deal, you have to let it work. This will teach them that they have to use skills. They can't just emotionally manipulate you. It is very powerful, but it is hard for them to want to use it. But they can use it. I've seen it time and time again. I have seen oppositional defiant children who've been diagnosed with the disorder of ODD change, learn to control themselves, rein in some of that ODD tendency, and lead pretty successful adult lives. Self-government parenting works best for oppositional defiant disorders as well as strong-willed children, or just your basic defiant moments that can happen with any child. So find out more about how to use these skills, and I would recommend starting with that disagree appropriately skill. I have a full class on here about disagreeing appropriately called Full Class About Disagreeing Appropriately. So click on the link to that video now and learn more about that gateway skill to self-government that is going to help your oppositional defiant child. I'll see you there.